Why Black Americana may become a billion-dollar asset class. One of the more interesting financial conversations almost nobody seems to be having seriously right now involves something many people still dismiss as old magazines, memorabilia, collectibles, or simple nostalgia. But the deeper issue may actually involve scarcity, cultural ownership, historical preservation, and long-term asset appreciation. That category is broadly referred to as Black Americana. Now, when many people hear that phrase, they think of vintage Ebony and Jet magazines, concert posters, Black Panther comics, Harlem Renaissance art, civil rights photographs, HBCU memorabilia, jazz and soul vinyl, movie lobby cards, rare folk art, historical documents, even controversial Jim Crow-era artifacts preserved as historical warnings. But the larger question may not merely involve nostalgia. The larger question may involve cultural assets, because history itself has value, and historically speaking, Black American cultural history has often been underpreserved, undervalued, commercially extracted, or institutionally controlled by entities outside the community itself. That may now be changing. The quiet revaluation of Black history. Black American history is deeply interwoven with music, fashion, athletics, politics, language, film, military history, comic books, entertainment, and global popular culture itself, which means authentic artifacts connected to that history are finite, and scarcity changes economics. The first appearance of Black Panther in Fantastic Four, number 52, is no longer merely a comic book. It is intellectual property tied to billion-dollar film franchises, Afrofuturism, global branding, and Black cultural mythology. Early Ebony magazines featuring Lena Horne, Nichelle Nichols, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Dr. King, Eartha Kitt are no longer simply magazines. They increasingly resemble historical documentation. And once institutions begin competing for finite historical artifacts, prices move rapidly. Museums already understand this auction. Houses, museums, and collectors are already aggressively pursuing Black photography, Harlem Renaissance works, civil rights artifacts, rare manuscripts, vintage Black publications, original concert posters, folk art, and authenticated cultural ephemera. Why? Because institutions understand something the public often realizes late. Cultural history eventually becomes cultural capital. The basement effect. This is another fascinating aspect of Black Americana. There are likely millions of historically important artifacts currently sitting in attics, garages, basements, old family homes, churches, beauty salons, storage bins with owners having absolutely no idea of their potential historical or financial value. Old Ebony magazines, Black Beat magazines, Right On magazines, comic books, political pamphlets, concert flyers, photographs, local newspapers, HBCU artifacts may increasingly become desirable as institutions and collectors compete for authenticated Black cultural history. And frankly, some of this material may already be undervalued. The bigger BWO point. Now, obviously, not every old magazine becomes valuable. Condition matters, scarcity matters, provenance matters, historical significance matters. But the broader thesis here is not really about flipping old paper on eBay. The larger thesis is that Black American cultural history itself may be entering a long-term revaluation period, especially as museums diversify collections, younger collectors enter markets, nostalgia economies expand, and institutions race to preserve disappearing historical material. Because once something becomes culturally foundational, historically significant, and finite markets begin forming around it. That's not hype. That's historical pattern recognition. Before, comic books became investment vehicles, sneakers became collectible assets, sports cards exploded, rare vinyl appreciated, fine art became untouchable, many people dismissed them as old stuff. The same possibility may increasingly exist around authenticated Black cultural history, because the issue is no longer merely nostalgia. The issue may ultimately become who owns the physical artifacts connected to one of the most culturally influential populations in modern history. That's a very different conversation. And honestly, that conversation may only be beginning